tough it's going to be just being in Miami. I mean, we're glad we didn't get them earlier in the season, but it's still going to be hot. We just got to focus up. I mean, we know it's coming, so we can't let it hit us in the face.
Welcome back to another edition of Enough Said. I am Dan Barreiro. I'm joined, as always, by Justin Gaard and Lori Fisher. Very excited about the football weekend and a number of other subjects that we will attempt to explore with our usual aplomb.
And it's Emmy Awards weekend.
Speaking of aplomb.
Upper Midwest Emmys.
So were we nominated again this year?
We were for Best Interview Discussion.
Oh,
so
wow.
we'll see what happens.
All right.
So stand by on Twitter.
Can't wait.
We'll be there.
Twitter
we'll be ready.
people.
Well, you'll announce it. We know that.
I will for sure.
Don't worry about you forgetting about it.
Well, Justin said, not Justin Gaard, Justin Jefferson said it's going to be hot in Miami. It's definitely cold here now that we have a little snow. But you can find the game against Miami at noon right here on Fox 9. The Vikings going into it 4-1, Dolphins 3-2. Miami rookie quarterback Skylar Thompson is expected to start with Tua and Teddy both in concussion protocol. But now we're hearing that Teddy might be available. So what does this all mean for the Vikings? Dan?
Well, it's confusing on Teddy because it almost looks like they want to have it both ways. They're clearly under siege in Miami because of the disaster with Tua.
Right.
And it's almost like they're afraid to play Tua even if he's ready to play. I think he's pretty much been ruled out. And it's almost like, well, we don't want to start Teddy for the same reason, but they're hedging their bet by saying, but if he's healthy enough, he'll be the backup, which makes no sense because if he's healthy enough to be the backup, don't just start him. He's a veteran quarterback. The new guy, I forgot his name already. Skylar Thompson.
Yeah, I think.
And, you know, maybe he'll be a wild card that we can't prepare for, and he'll be brilliant and be a great storyline on Sunday. But so I guess I'm completely confused by what Miami is doing. I think if it's Skylar Thompson, it is another massive break for your favorite football team because for the second time in 3 weeks, they will be going with, in this case, facing a third-string quarterback, not even a second-string quarterback, as was the case against the Saints.
You take a trip to Miami if you're from Minnesota anytime, even if it is October, and snow did just come, so Justin Jefferson's saying it's going to be tough. I think you'll be fine. I think we'll be good. Make sure you hydrate on the plane.
Why were we practicing indoors, though?
I think we were turning the humidity up.
Can you do that?
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. Those new buildings, yeah, you can turn them way up. You can turn them way down.
Going to have to be moved way up
You
to
can
match
actually
Miami.
bring in a fake snow machine if you want. That was one thing that was ruled out a few years ago at Gophers Sports, but it doesn't mean that it wasn't asked for, the fake snow machine in the building. And you take, whenever you're playing a backup quarterback, you take that gift as well. I'm with you. Although the Vikings stat I saw this week, Dan, somehow Minnesota's something like 8-8-1 their last 17 games against backup quarterbacks. I don't know if third strings are in there. I don't know if that's the exact record either, but it's not as gaudy as you would think it was. But you take the early season gift. You know me, my glass is half full. Last week, I think it's 3/4 full after the Bears win, even though they looked awful on Thursday night, and the Vikings made a meat grinder of that game as well. I just say, keep continuing to take these gifts, keep continuing to get better, keep continuing to make these plays, and let's see where we are at the end of the year.
Here's what I'm willing to say. You are taking, to this point, full advantage of your schedule. You still aren't going to convince me that you're an upper echelon team as long as you're playing for another week. Well, Miami's not a bad team, but the last 3 weeks
and with their quarterbacks, they might be.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mediocre teams and have struggled against each of them, and to this point have not won an actual road game. The Saints game, yeah, it was on the road, but it was not a road game in the sense that you really were at any sort of meaningful disadvantage compared to the team you were playing.
30 seconds.
So let's, this is an opportunity to do that. I mean, Miami got off to a good start, but as you say, you can't apologize for the good fortune.
Right.
Better you keep accruing the wins because that puts you in a good position and probably would lock up pretty close to a playoff berth, barring a collapse, right? The way the conference is going. But again, I can't not know who we're playing and who we are struggling against before I'm ready to say, or I have to know that before I'm ready to say, yeah, let's see what we can do against an Eagles kind of team, and then maybe we got something.
And then we have our bye week. NFL owners meet in New York next week after 2 disputed calls in Week 5. It sounds like they're going to talk about potential rule changes when it comes to roughing the passer. Not for this season, though. The idea of reviewing it in the booth didn't work before. Justin?
Yeah, I don't know how you really review. Those are tough ones for me to review because it literally is the full speed action broken down to like thousandths of a second. That's really hard to then make a big determination, a serious determination. And a lot of them, when you're talking about roughing the passer or illegal hits or whatever, those are typically 15 yards. If it's a targeting deal, they might be gone. To me, Dan, they lost control of this thing. And I think this was the Anthony Barr rule, was it not? That you couldn't land directly on a quarterback while you were sacking him, and you had to kind of do some kind of tuck and roll turn to gently lay the quarterback down onto the ground. Your full body weight couldn't. I know what the intent was with that, and maybe they can still live with that in some way. But when they started breaking it down to me that specifically, I think they kind of lost their way with this thing. And now we've seen back-to-back weeks where there's been a dreadful roughing the passer call, and we know why they want to protect guys. We know why they want to keep the game safer. But at some point, you also have to play tackle football. And I just feel like they lost control of this thing a few years back when they started to legislate how you could bring somebody down to the ground.
It's like a contradiction. What I'm about to say will sound like a contradiction, but the numbers indicate there are fewer roughing the passer calls being called thus far this season compared to past seasons, and yet the bad ones have been so egregious. I mean, when you have, was it the Monday night game with the Raiders against the Chiefs, where you have a defensive lineman who sacks the quarterback, and as he's doing it, takes the ball away from him.
It's crazy.
And he's penalized because as they're coming to the ground, he lands too much of his weight on him. You're making a mockery out of playing football and playing defensive football, and you're killing whatever spirit that particular player might have. So I don't know what the answer is, because the referees will tell you, well, it's in the rule book.
That's it.
We're following the rules.
Yep.
You say you want your quarterbacks protected. But if in the balancing act, it has swung way too far. I don't know that, because some people say, well, that's why then this should be replayable.
That's tough.
I think that's another whole hornet's nest if you open it up. You know how I feel about replay. I'm not even convinced that you'll get better decisions at the end of that. But these calls are too big and too meaningful. And to me, they don't even fall into the classification of truly protecting the quarterback anyway. But, defensive players often are off balance, right? When they're trying to bring somebody down. So their intent probably often isn't to cheap shot them or to slam them. I just don't think people are being real. Even the people in the game who are involved with the competition committee are being realistic about what they can expect.
We've seen that the Chiefs play a number of times now. Where is he supposed to go? He's got a guy. He's coming from behind. First of all, he's scrambling around the end. He's trying to get Derek Carr. He's got a teammate to his left, a teammate to his right. There's not a lot of safety valves there. I think we understand why they put that rule in, because you want to eliminate the dirty plays.
Absolutely.
But I think there's a grayer area, or maybe a more black and white area is the best way to describe it. It was something that is absolutely dirty, something that's absolutely needs to be out of the game, and a guy just making a tackle and making a football play. That player had nowhere to go except what he did.
It sucks the life out of a team, and really, to me, out of a game. We're all addicted to football, but cumulatively, I do think this starts having an effect on the way people process the game and whether they can even enjoy it the same.
Next
well, that's not fair.
Well, and remember the Kenny Pickett play, the Pitt play last year in college?
Yes.
For me, he should never have played in the NFL another day, because he fake slided or fake slid.
We're going to move on.
Let's be grammatically correct. Because he knew he had protection, faked it, ran in for a touchdown, and everybody celebrated. That's ridiculous.
Should have been thrown out of the game,
Next
you're right,
up.
And banned from the NFL.
We need to move on.
He should not be playing for the Steelers right now.
Okay, the Timberwolves are just rocking it in the preseason. They beat the Lakers Wednesday night, 118-113. Backup center Luka Garza was the star. 15 points in the fourth quarter. Regular season begins this Wednesday at home against the Oklahoma Thunder. There are high hopes for the season, as we talked about, especially with the Wolves' deep bench. Dan?
This is foreshadowing for what we might be talking about in our next block. Beware getting excited about gaudy preseason records. And the Wolves they are undefeated, and they have been in their own way impressive, even though different starters have played different games. But again, it's such a different animal in every sport. And interestingly, preseason NBA basketball, once upon a time, was a nothing.
Yeah.
It has become, again, I think because of TV and interest in the game, a very, very big thing. It's very strange to me. I don't understand exactly how and why, but it keeps happening. I will say this, and this again may be foreshadowing. I'm actually more optimistic going into this season about the Wolves than I am the Wild, and it's pretty simple. The Wolves added a significant piece at a price, but a significantly good to a great defensive player. And the Wild lost one. We're going to get into that more later.
Yep.
But I am, it has nothing to do with the preseason record. I am bullish on this club. The only question is Towns got to regain his strength, because it doesn't look to me like he's ready for the start of this season, physically, if not mentally. And then the D'Lo factor.
Yeah.
Will he be consistent? Because they need him to be a consistent guy running the team.
What's so funny about NBA preseason, it's exactly the opposite of NFL preseason, because guys are actually playing, which is interesting. And we talked the entire NFL preseason that the NBA or the NFL is doing nothing to really garner any attention. We shouldn't spend much time talking about it. Now on the NBA side, we're completely overreacting to everything we see, which is great, which is what we used to do with the NFL. I totally agree with you on D'Lo. I'd throw Anthony Edwards in too. We talked about him last week. Does he take the jump? I think at some point Carl will regain the strength. We kind of know what he is. We know what Gobert is. But where does D'Lo fit in on this? Consistent is absolutely the right word. And consistent with Ant as well, because if he takes a big leap, then I do think you have something going here. But the West, man, is going.
We are a structured, defensively sound group, and to a man, we weren't tonight.
Welcome back to Enough Said. The Wild opened their season Thursday night against the New York Rangers, and unfortunately they lost 7-3. It was a bummer of a game to watch as a fan. It started off poorly with the Wild going into the second period down by 3. The momentum started to shift just a little bit, kind of back and forth, but the Wild just couldn't keep up with the Rangers. They are back, the Wild that is, Saturday night at home against the Los Angeles Kings. Justin?
Two desperate teams. I think the Kings have lost their first two to start. It's all right. We're going to talk about a must-win game in Champaign on Saturday with the Gophers in Illinois. Maybe it's already this with Los Angeles and with Minnesota. Yeah, Lori laid it out nicely. What a dud. What a disappointment. And really a debacle defensively. That's a lot of alliteration with the Ds, but that's how I felt about it. And it basically started almost immediately and then never really stopped. Sloppy defense. Average goaltending, which was obviously a huge question mark going into the season, at least on this side of the table, and we're never really, and bad special teams it looked like as well. So disappointing. We talked on the radio, Dan, about what were realistic expectations and what were people willing to accept. I said it then, a lot easier to be philosophical before you played, and obviously they've got 81 more games to go in this regular season, and New York, very good. Some people think they're going to win the Eastern Conference, but that was a buzzkill. It was just a flat-out buzzkill way to start the year.
Yeah, it was, part of what I've talked about is not worrying so much about the regular season record perhaps being as gaudy as last year. If, over the course of the season, you progress in a couple of key areas, including the power play, that actually should be livable. But there are also minimum standards of performance that you say, well, that can't work either. Whatever we were attempting to do or experimenting with yesterday isn't going to work. And, we haven't talked about this a lot on the radio, but we did at the end of last season that, if you lose Fiala, you lose a significant scorer, it's difficult to make up that level of scoring.
Right.
So how else can you compensate? Well, you can compensate by becoming a better defensive team. They were not a very good defensive team last year. They tended to outscore the opposition. So, again, this was the first litmus test of where are we defensively? A mess. It was a bad defensive performance.
30.
And that's part of what has to get better over a period of time. And maybe that's going to be harder without the two-headed goaltender approach that you had last year and the risk you took by doing, let's face it, Bill Guerin did an about-face on keeping basically two legitimate goaltenders, traded Talbot away. Now it's all on Fleury. I don't think it was all on him last night.
Right.
But I certainly don't think he saved your butt.
Right.
Which goalies are allowed to do. So that's what we're going to have to watch beyond the power play. Is all right. Defensively, we got to batten down the hatches a little bit. We can't count on scoring 6 goals a night. And the one time, didn't they cut the lead to 2 and got a 2-man advantage
3-1,
and did nothing with it as well. So even the offense was not
well, it's interesting,
Next
and I know Bill Guerin, to his credit, likes to say, and he said it with you this week, this isn't the old Minnesota Wild. That sounds good, and he's right, and that's why people are excited about the future. However, the one thing the old Minnesota Wild always did was defend well. Even if they couldn't score in the postseason or anything else, they always defended pretty well. So there's got to be a meeting in the middle there, I think.
The Gopher football team plays on Saturday after their bye week. They're going into the game against Illinois 4-1 overall and 1-1 in their conference. And if we are all on TV in 10 years from now, we will be talking about the Alabama game. The Gophers play them in 2032 and 2033. Dan?
I'm wondering, first of all, how many badges I will have gone through by then.
Don't lose your badge. You just got it.
How many Emmy nominations but no victories?
Yeah. Wow.
That's also
13
true.
or 14 probably at
that would
point.
be really sad.
I'm not going on much of a limb to say, you're in this is the maybe the key game of the season for your Gophers. The danger of saying that is the Big Ten West looks so open. Maybe you could win the division with 3 losses. I don't even know anymore. It's a mess. But I do know that because of the way you spit up the bit at home against Purdue, you have to compensate for that. And in all honesty, you should be able to go to, if you're the team you want to be, and the program is at the place it's supposed to be, you should be able to go to Illinois and win, even if Illinois is improved. The Gophers have one, on paper at least, significant advantage over the team that tried to win at Illinois last week. That's Iowa. The Gophers have an offense.
Yep.
They're at least supposed to have an offense. So I think if you push back offensively on Illinois, you should be able to win it, but you kind of have to. Because if you got Penn State the next week and you start talking about a 3-game losing streak, then this team is not getting to that place that we all felt it had the opportunity to get to at all. So go and take care of business.
Yep.
Against Illinois.
And they are favored in this game. We have some uncertainty over who's going to start for Illinois at quarterback. It sounds like they're getting some other players that were questionable back, but the quarterback is a big deal for them, it appears, given how the point spread has kind of ebbed and flowed. You hit it. The Big Ten is wide open. I think a team could win the Big Ten West with 3 losses, but I don't think it's the Gophers because they lost to Purdue. I said it last week. It was a damaging loss.
30.
And so to get themselves back into this thing, and maybe even eliminate another team because Illinois, I think, has Michigan down the road. They've already lost to Indiana. It sounds crazy to be doing this kind of gerrymandering with the schedule and the games and talking about all that, in mid-October. But that's where we are right now because every team kind of has a game they're mad about. Every team has different would-be losses, we think, going down the way. So I never would have called it in July that this was a must-win game and a huge game for both teams in the Big Ten West, but it absolutely is.
Ibrahim will start. Is that correct?
That's what PJ said.
That's pretty key.
That's helpful.
New guidelines say kids 8 and older should be screened for anxiety. The U.S. Preventative Service Task Force says this includes kids who show no signs or symptoms of anxiety or depression. Mental illness is on the rise with kids, as we know, and COVID and addiction to phones and all that doesn't help. It would be great to make it part of a wellness check, but if not, good luck. I know parents who have waited months to find a provider for help. Dan?
It's a complicated story, and I think even among some doctors I've seen quoted, it's a bit of a worrisome story because some of them aren't convinced that these guidelines make sense, and the threading the needle on this is difficult and complicated because obviously no one wants to continue to stigmatize the notion of getting help, or you have a depression issue, or you have an anxiety issue. But I heard a doctor on the radio earlier this week somewhere basically say, who's a clinician who does this for a living, and says, we got to be careful here about how we handle the definitions. If you are anxious about something, it doesn't necessarily mean you, clinically speaking, have anxiety.
Right.
If you are depressed about something, it doesn't necessarily mean you suffer from depression. But if you sort of make that the language that people are thinking of, there's a certain pathology that kicks in, and in this doctor's opinion, you can end up making, despite your good intentions, you can end up making a situation worse. So I don't know what the right spot is, the sweet spot on this, but I think we got to be really, really careful. The old, you sure you're not depressed?
Right.
Come on, now, if you're depressed, we've got some goals, we've got a system by which we can help to evaluate you. And so I think we also have to be aware of that and bring some sanity to the discussion.
Oh, and what is the actual right age? What is leading to some of these things? We definitely don't have an answer for online or the phone, right?
Right.
Because that's a huge, that thing has gone so quickly. I think a lot of people are trying to play catch up on that, and what does that really mean and what issues are it leading to? My biggest concern on this as well, Dan, and we've seen this when it comes to attention deficit stuff and all that we, I think, caught up to about a decade ago. is medication on it too. And do we want to be loading up 8 and 9-year-olds with different types of meds that can be very helpful but might not be necessary at that point? You're right, it's tough because you do want to be sensitive to everything here.
I was going to say, don't stigmatize life. Don't stigmatize part of growing up.
Up next, we're going to find out if Dan and Justin are good spellers.
Well, now I'm anxious.
Welcome back to Enough Said. Big Ten Media Days was in town this week for men's and women's basketball. Some coaches allegedly complained about it being in Minnesota despite our beautiful weather earlier this week, Justin.
Well, I appreciate Ohio State coach Chris Holtman saying, look, we're coaches. We would have complained if this was in our backyard. We hit the brand very hard as Minnesotans. It has nothing to do with the weather. Nobody likes Media Day. You know the most productive thing for me, Dan, as a guy who went to Media Day, I think I'm in the background there, was meeting new Fox 9 sports reporter Ahmad Hicks. That was the highlight of Media Day. And that's not a slight at Ahmad. That was fun. That was great. But Media Day is stupid.
Next up. Welcome, Ahmad. A Twins shortstop, Carlos Correa, will be a free agent. The Twins could still sign him, but now they're competing with other teams who are willing to give him a hefty long-term contract. Is that why you're laughing, Dan? I'm
laughing because, yeah, he's not coming back here. And here's the sick part. I'm not even sure I want him to come back here, even though he's a hell of a player, because if we spend a big bucket load of money on him,
it's over.
There's no chance we're going to spend another big bucket load of money, which we should, on a pitcher. So just we laughed, we cried with Correa, but it's over. He's not coming back.
I hope people bought the T-shirt jersey that are like $40 and not the real authentic jerseys that are like $250.
Las Vegas Raiders' Davante Adams says he's sorry for shoving a credentialed person on the field Monday night. He was frustrated after losing against the Chiefs. There you go, right there, 30-29. He was charged with a misdemeanor assault, Dan.
Davante Adams is frustrated that he made a bad decision in terms of winning by going to a team that's not very good and a quarterback who's not as good as the one that he had previously. And by the way, that team is struggling without him as well.
Yeah, they could use him.
That wasn't anybody's fault. I don't think that was the photographer's fault. And does he need to be put in jail? No.
Exactly.
It's a misdemeanor. And it's going to be handled, but it was a bad look.
And finally, everyone has a word or words that you just have trouble spelling. Mine has always been Florida. For some reason, I can't spell the state.
Until
so I think
Florida came out.
Yes, every time. Now I got it. It's down. But the online word finding tool Word Tips put out a list of the most common misspelled ones. Number 1, coolie, like nonchalant, like she walked in coolly. Is that one tough for you guys? Do you know how to spell that?
I don't think I've ever.
I was a great speller.
Can you spell coolie?
No.
Justin?
It took me 12 years. The toughest word for me to spell is Barreiro.
You know what? On our very first Enough Said show, we spelled your name wrong. Well, here, Chris, show the other ones. Sergeant, which makes sense. A lot of people do S.
Yeah, Sergeant's a toughie.
Supersede, drunkenness, because they missed that second N, and dumbbell because they missed that second B.
Yeah, those are tough ones.
They broke it down. They took tweets from around the world.
The word misspelled is often.
I almost misspelled it. For Minnesota, they broke it down states. Becoming, which seems odd to me.
That is weird.
That is very
weird.
Speaking of misspelling Barreiro, we misspelled Barreiro on the first batch of wedding programs. And
I forgot that. Is that true?
Cost us thousands of dollars.
Wait, he was in your wedding?
He wasn't. His daughter
No, I wasn't, yeah.
Flower girl.
My daughter threw the flowers down on the ground.
Flower girl. I wish we had video of that, but we looked at it. There was one misspelling. It was Barreiro, and it said, well, right.
At least you didn't misspell Gaard.
Yeah, we got that right.
We should at least spell our names right. Enough said.
There's 2 A's in that one.